Welcome to the Hyundai Studios here on STOHD.com for STO Fantasy Playbook. I'm Will Ewick, joined alongside special guest once again, Al Pulowski. Today we have start sits, the injury impact, and also the fantasy marketplace. We begin with start sits. Reminder, we're looking for those no-name guys or those fringe players that you can plug in and play this week. Speaking of no-name guys, Logan Paulson for you. You think he's a good play?
I think he is, and that's because now with, of course, Fred Davis out in Washington and RG3 having the type of year that he is, Logan Paulson now becomes the #1 tight end. Yes, the Redskins have signed Chris Cooley, but it's going to take him a while to get back into shape. Will he be the #1 or not? We'll see. At least for this week, and probably the next couple, Logan Paulson will be the #1. He performed well on Sunday. He caught 4 passes for 76 yards. I like him as a start. Doug Martin, I'm not too proud. Last week I said, hey, this guy, ultimately he hasn't scored a lot of points. Go ahead and sit him. Last week he got the rushing touchdown. 2 straight weeks now, over 100 total combined yards. I like Doug Martin, especially this week. He's got the matchup of Minnesota. They gave up almost 150 yards to LaRod Stevens-Howling. Doug Martin should get at least that. So those are the 2 guys to start for me.
I went out on a limb last week with a couple wide receivers, and I hope you listened because it paid off. Jeremy Curley had a monster career day. Moore gets in the end zone. I'm going to tempt fate and do it again. I got a guy here, Chris Givens. You talk about no names. He's a wide receiver, and unless you are a diehard fantasy guy or a Rams fan, you've probably never heard of him. So I'm going to tempt fate and say that he's going to be a good play this week. 158 yards on just 6 catches the last 2 weeks. He doesn't get a lot of looks, but they're trying to get him more involved. He has a 50-plus yard catch in each of the last 4 games. They're going against the Pats. I think they're going to have to keep up. They're going to throw the ball, and they're also getting him involved in the running game, so watch out for him there. My other start, Alex Green, only has 100 yards rushing in the last 2 games, but the Packers are pleased, and they should feature him against the Jacksonville defense, giving up an average of 129.2 rushing yards a game. They're also allowing 6 rushing touchdowns on the year, so I think Alex Green may get in the end zone. We may finally see a resemblance of a rushing game in Green Bay. Now we move on to our sits, and this is a reminder we're looking for those big-name guys that maybe you should have on the pine this week. And for you, Al, a couple guys this week you should have on the pine.
Yeah, one of those is William Powell for the Arizona Cardinals. He had a good start a couple of weeks ago. I thought that this guy was going to be one that was going to, moving forward, be the #1 back. Well, this past week, Stevens-Howling gets over 100 yards rushing, almost 150 total. So for now, he's the #2 in Arizona. Bottom line is with the Cardinals, between Stevens-Howling and Powell, either one could get it. They'll probably go with the hot hand. I would stay away from starting any running back in Arizona right now. Also, the Pittsburgh defense. I mean, this defense has really gone downhill this year, mainly because of injuries. But the other problem with the Pittsburgh defense this week is they're facing the Redskins on RG3. He's probably going to have a big week. I would not start Pittsburgh if you have a better alternative, and you should.
And we see that a lot of times where people just get by a name value. You hear that Steelers defense and you think they're great, but if you look at the numbers, they're not really having the year that they are used to. You talked about that backfield there in Arizona you want to avoid. I think the one in Carolina is just as bad. You have Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams. You also have Tolbert stealing the goal line carries. Cam Newton doing a lot of running, so there's not enough work to go around. Jonathan Stewart coming in. He led the Panthers last week in carries with 10, but he only managed 35 yards. That backfield is a fantasy mess. I avoid it right now, and especially going against a tough Bears defense that is the second best against the run. My other sit, Jermichael Finley, just 7 receptions for 54 yards in the last 3 games. Crabtree kind of stealing some snaps. Too many receiver options in Green Bay. They're playing Jacksonville, who actually has a pretty decent pass defense, especially against the tight end. So I would sit Jermichael Finley for better options out there right now. So we move on to our injury impact. Maurice Jones-Drew goes down. We don't know how long exactly he'll be out, but Jennings could be a good play. But this week, it is kind of a tough matchup, though.
It is a tough matchup this week. You could run out and pick up Jennings. You know he's going to get the start. You know he's going to get the touches. Again, if you're short on running back for this week, I don't think it's a bad start. But would I trade in somebody else that I'm pretty comfortable with for him? I'd say no. Plus, you don't know when Jones-Drew is coming back. Will it be a couple of weeks? Will it be the rest of the season? The problem with that guy is you just don't know. So I would stay away from the Jacksonville running back situation, again, unless I desperately need a running back for this week. Again, you know Jennings will get the touches. I would go with him in that situation.
And Jones-Drew is a player. He eats his Wheaties every day, so he's going to be out not as long as you would expect an average person like that. We move on to our fantasy marketplace. Guys, you can buy low, sell high. A couple of tight ends for you this week, Al. Yeah,
let's look at one that I think you can buy low right now, and that's Jacob Tamme. Now, why do I like him? Well, he's been with Peyton Manning for quite some time. He was with him in Indianapolis. Tamme this week has a great matchup against New Orleans. I think this is a good week to get him. You should be able to pick him off the waiver wire for nothing. Vernon Davis, though, in San Francisco, will stay with the tight end theme. He had no passes last week. He had 0 points. Here's a guy that has been a great tight end, but he's also complaining a little bit now. I think his stock is definitely down. You might not have a better option, on your bench, but he's not a guy like, let's say if I've got Tony Gonzalez, I'm starting Tony Gonzalez over Vernon Davis.
Tony Gonzalez is an ageless wonder. He just keeps getting better with age. For my fantasy stock up, I don't know what else I can do, Al. I've wrote about him in the fantasy waiver wire column. I've talked about him on the show a couple of times. Jeremy Curley.
He's your guy.
Yet he's only owned in about 42% of league. He's just starting his breakout. He had 7 receptions for 120 yards. He's averaging 17.1 yards per catch. The number 1 target in the Jets offense, Sanchez, good rapport with him. His stock is only going to continue to get higher, and as I said, he's about 40% owned, so go grab him right now. My stock down, Rashard Mendenhall. Achilles injury, that could nag him for a while. Also, Jonathan Dwyer stepped in and looked awesome. He proved that he deserves more touches. He's also a big running back, so he could steal those goal line touches. So when Mendenhall gets back, it's kind of a crowded backfield, and he may have lost his job to injury, which we've seen happen before.
Yeah, and they've got Isaac Redmond there in Pittsburgh, too. I would stay away from that Pittsburgh backfield altogether.
A lot of backfields. They do the time splits, and you just never know where it's going to go.
Exactly.
That's all the time we have for STO Fantasy Playbook. Thanks for tuning in. For Al Pulowski, I'm Will Hewitt. It's your fantasy. We just happen to be in it.